right. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 128. It is Tuesday night in the off season. We've been doing some abbreviated shows to kind of keep things up and give you all an opportunity to share your thoughts on college football this week and every week here in the off season. My name's Bob Hyeri. Thanks for joining. If you'd like to join in and give your input, love to hear from you. You can always hit request. It's in the lower left corner of the Twitter app, which you can use to join in and share your thoughts. Otherwise, happy to sit back and talk a little bit about what's going on in college football right now, especially since we have the opportunity to see what's going on our CFB, which is, of course, one of those centers for college football talk on the internet. And let's see. One of the stories that's been kind of interesting that came out actually today is talking about Tennessee. They've unfortunately had some coaches and administrators in the past regime that committed NCAA violations. So the NCAA gave an update, just letting it know that they've come to an agreement with the NCAA enforcement staff. To an extent, as much as it is derided, it is a little bit milder now after the troubles that some people have criticized that the Committee on Infractions have been a little bit too aggressive, especially in the about a decade ago. But now they've been trying to work more with the programs to come with some sort of agreement. I know Miami was in the news recently because, of course, the Twins on the women's basketball team were given an impermissible benefit when they got to meet John Ruiz, the super booster at Miami. In the end, the NCAA did not levy that severe of infractions. I mean, Ruiz was not forced to disassociate from the program. All he had to do was get like some refresher course with the Miami athletic department. The players weren't punished. And I believe they've just been issued some mild probationary things involving recruiting for the Miami women's basketball program. But overall, so far, the NCAA has not been punishing people as severely as they have in the past. Again, if you'd like to join in on any kind of topic, please feel free to join and hit request in the lower left corner. Be happy to let you up. So moving on, one of the other big topics that was really popular, I mean, the most popular topic on our CFB this week was, oddly enough, Texas football's uniforms, because Longhorns athletic director Chris Del Conte said the Longhorns simply will not have alternate uniforms. And that's, of course, been one of the big traditions for Texas. If God wanted multicolored sunsets, he'd have made them purple and green, but he didn't. This is him, of course, talking. They're burnt orange. It's not old. It's not stuffy. It's Texas. It's the best. Now, that quote was cute, and I'm sure it was popular with, of course, the Texas faithful. Some folks were quick to point out that sunsets are famously multicolored. Some are quite beautiful, and some are purple. And I certainly see a few out here in Minnesota when winter comes along. But, Texas tradition, I like their old-fashioned uniforms. I mean, you could say the same thing about USC or Penn State. Alabama, they're not really teams to rush into alternates. Of course, some programs are excellent at them. I mean, Oregon really went from being a rather mundane uniform, if you've ever seen what the uniforms there looked like in the 80s, to what they are now. But again, that's just one of those topics. It was striking that was the most popular topic on our CFB this week in college football. Again, if there's any topic you'd like to join in on, just please feel free to hit request. Would love to have you join me and hear what your thoughts are. One of the more interesting ongoing sagas, and this is one I wanted to talk about this week, is watching what's happening with the ACC. Started about 4 days ago. Florida State fired a warning shot to the ACC, as was reported in the Tampa Bay Times, that something has to change. Now, what that was kind of fleshed out over the following days. Dennis Dodd over at CBS has been pretty good about reporting about what's been going on, at least in this initial wave of ACC news. The Florida State athletic director has basically drawn a line in the sand, according to Dennis Dodd, telling the ACC it has to institute an uneven revenue distribution model, or Florida State is supposedly, and we'll get to that in a second, supposedly going to bolt. Now, Dennis was reporting quite frequently on this. He shared one of the slides that showed the the TV contracts to the FSU Board of Trustees in the presentation, as summarized by Redditor Mike in San Francisco, Los Angeles. The ACC was so far paying its teams per year about $17 million. They're known for having a rather long TV contract right now that will extend for 12 more years. At this point, the Big 12 is paying out its teams 31.7 million per team per year for 6 more years. The Pac-12, which of course has its poor revenue contract, is what seems to have driven, well, what was certainly the primary reason longtime members USC and UCLA are bolting for the Big Ten. It's been paying its members $20 million per team per year for the next year. And obviously that's the big issue, and we'll talk about that a little later. They're still in the process of trying to renegotiate the Pac-12 media deal, knowing that USC and UCLA are leaving. But then the big two that are left, the SEC is currently paying out its teams $51 million per team per year for 10 more years. And then the Big Ten, under its new contract, when you assemble all of those payments together, appears to be paying its teams $67 million a year per team per year for 7 more years. And of course, all of those numbers could be renegotiated. But the ACC currently is on the lower end of the scale, and that is quite annoying to the Seminoles because, as is pointed out in some of the later writings, they are wanting an uneven distribution model. Basically, what Texas has historically had with the Big 12, of course, that uneven revenue model is what sort of drove a lot of animosity within the conference, particularly towards the Longhorns, and may have arguably led to their departure. In fact, that uneven revenue model with the Big Ten, probably with the Big 12, the Longhorn Network, and how funds are distributed, is what put the kibosh, over 10 years ago, when there was that brief moment where Texas and Oklahoma, as well as potentially Oklahoma State and Texas Tech, were looking to bolt to the Pac-12. That, of course, never went through, but one of the big stumbling blocks that was mentioned in all the reporting that went on at the time was trying to appease Texas with that uneven revenue model that they had put together with the Big 12 in order to keep them in the conference. Again, if you'd like to join any of this or any other topic, you can always hit request. Just please feel free. I'd be happy to let you up and talk college football. But going in, kind of looking at some of these other reports that have been coming out this week, again, Dennis Dodd has been pretty upfront about this on Twitter. The Florida State General Counsel, apparently reporting to their Board of Regents or Board of Trustees, has put about $120 million price tag on buying themselves out of the ACC. Now, whether or not they're willing to do that, of course, is an entirely different question. Now, there's been some pushback from the ACC, at least indirectly. Florida State and Clemson are allegedly to have zero leverage or $350 million laying around. There's a lot of certainly some griping going back and forth between those programs and the ACC over the future of how that would work. Florida State's athletic director, Mike Alford, has pointed out that the school contributes roughly 15% of the value of the ACC's media rights, but only receives 7% of the distributions. And again, that is why they are considering that $120 million departure fee that they have calculated. Of course, some of this stuff ends up in courts. Sometimes there's negotiated settlements. We've seen that happen with all kinds of matters in the conference carousel. Another more recent report is one thing to remember, and this is again reporting from Dennis Dodd. One thing to remember about Florida State and Clemson's saber rattling: it's one thing to get out of the ACC deal. It's another to assume Fox and ESPN are going to rip up their current deals to pay them more in another conference. Those networks love certainty. So that whole brouhaha over the last several days between Florida State and, to a lesser extent, Clemson with the ACC has been one of those topics that will certainly generate more headlines over the next week. It's been interesting to see, and a lot of folks have been wondering on the sideline. I mean, the ACC has that famous grant of rights arrangement where the buyout is tremendous for its programs were they to leave, and that's why in the latest last summer round of realignment talks with the Big 12, of course, bringing in the teams they're bringing in, as well as because to replace the departure, of course, of Texas and Oklahoma, as well as the Pac-12 losing the big USC and UCLA to the Big Ten. The one conference that seemed the most stable was the ACC because of that grant of rights deal, because it costs those teams so much to leave. But now, this week, Florida State is starting to fire some of those warning shots that say they might be willing to do and take drastic measures to potentially depart from the conference. Now, where they would end up, it seems like the AC's, probably the SEC would be a natural fit because, of course, Florida's there and there's some good football to be played among them all. I'm not sure the Big Ten would necessarily be willing to deal for them. Of course, they're such a major brand. I would be shocked if they wouldn't. I mean, Florida State told the Big Ten after getting out of it, we'd like to join you. I'd be shocked if they didn't look twice at them because, I mean, the Knowles are a national brand and they bring in a lot of significance across the Sunshine State and beyond. But kind of transitioning again from conference talk on the ACC. The other saga is, of course, the Pac-12 because they are absolutely trying to save that media deal that they are, that is no longer going to have USC or UCLA present. One thing that was pointed out, and this is by Chris Vanini of The Athletic, streaming is not going to save college football as we know it because it's not saving TV. And that's relevant to the Pac-12 because it seems like they're having problems with the so-called linear options, the normal TV, the normal cable networks, and they're getting a lot of overtures from streaming. Now, as nice as streaming is, allows you to go watch whatever show you want at night, whether it's on any of the options, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Apple TV. It's not a place you go to kind of randomly find a TV show or randomly find and look for things quite as often as it was on cable. And the concern is, especially for college sports, college football, if somebody's not really into watching the Pac-12, unless it's an extremely important game, the odds of them deciding to fire up Apple TV or whatever streaming option to follow the Pac-12 may not work in their favor. Again, without Dennis, as Dennis Dodd points out, without UCLA and USC, it's really hard to see what the Pac-12 is actually selling, especially as it seems like Oregon and Washington are not entirely interested in staying in the conference. Later, about 4 days ago, we had a report from Brett McMurphy that Apple has still not made a formal offer for the Pac-12's media rights. And then there was this rumor that Ion Television had emerged as a potential Pac-12 partner. Of course, later on, we heard that Ion Scripps Sports is not involved in Pac-12's TV negotiations, and that was later reported by Stuart Mandel at The Athletic. One thing I got to say, some of this reporting, you always have to take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes the media is good at finding information, and I respect that. But sometimes things happen secretly. We can all remember how shocking it was to find the Big Ten had already poached USC and UCLA, and the writing was already on the wall. So again, sometimes things do get missed. The bigger the story, though, the bigger the number of people. Typically, rumors with a kernel of salt do get out there. I mean, we see that in the recruiting world all the time. But some of this stuff I would take with a grain of salt. One of the other reports that came out, and this is again from Hayes, sources do insist that the Big Ten is not finished rating the Pac-12. That would really seem to point to only a handful of teams, whether that be Oregon or Washington or potentially a team from the Bay Area. The Bay Area keeps coming up not because Stanford and Cal are exceptional national brands in the same level as you might get from USC football or UCLA basketball, but simply because of the sheer number of televisions in the Bay Area are a significant number when you added them all up with of course, San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, that entire market. That is something that does outgun Seattle a little bit and certainly Portland. And that's one of those reasons why the Bay Area will sometimes come up. Although when it comes down to athletic prowess, Washington and Oregon at this point certainly are the ascendant programs. I mean, Cal is struggling athletically, financially, and they have for a long time because of some really bad decisions they made when they were renovating Memorial Stadium and then deciding to throw in a bunch of facilities in the process. Every program needs those to compete. Cal really made some optimistic estimations. It was actually fascinating. I remember when they were starting to release that information, they thought they would be able to sell, seat licenses like you can at a program like Alabama or Florida State or even USC or Michigan. And Cal has never had that kind of following. So as of I remember the latest numbers are the University of UC Berkeley, the central campus, is still giving the athletic department $31 million this last academic year to help pay off the debts that they have accrued to help the program stay in the black. So that's one of the reasons why Cal would certainly love to join the Big 12, probably the Big 10, but they're not an attractive program for a lot of reasons, and that they've been struggling for so much, where Washington and Oregon have been more well funded, more committed to running a program that might be able to compete in the Big Ten. And Stanford certainly has um, the wherewithal to do it should they choose to. Again, if you'd like to join any of this, add any of your thoughts to what's going on in college football this week, please feel free to hit request. Would love to have you join me, and love to hear your thoughts on any area of college football. Continuing kind of along with this Pac 12 story that has been going on this week, one of the other reports is that Amazon's Pac 12 interest is primarily in streaming a Friday night game. Now, there's nothing wrong with kind of piecemeal assembling a media deal. Certainly, that's part of what has given the Big Ten such a tremendous payout for its programs. I mean, it's split between NBC, CBS, and Fox. And when you add all of those programs, pardon me, all of those TV deals together, it's what's giving the Big Ten programs the big payouts that are currently going to be leading the college football universe at this point. But some of these options that are appearing for the Pac-12 are a little bit dicey, and definitely one of the things that ESPN has said. ESPN still said to have interest in broadcasting a weekly Pac-12 game at the super late 10:30 Eastern spot on Saturday. So good old Pac-12 after dark, as well as broadcasting the Pac-12 championship game. But the problem is trying to assemble some kind of media system for the rest of the Pac-12's football games. Kind of adding to all of this animosity within the conference, obviously with the LA teams leaving. Los Angeles had previously been for many years the home of the Pac-12 Media Day. And just yesterday, the Pac-12 announced Football Media Day is going to be moved from Los Angeles to Las Vegas this year. And first of all, I mean, I think that's awesome. I mean, I would rather be in Vegas for any media day. The Mountain West historically has done their media day in Vegas for many years now, and it's an enjoyable place to go. You can easily host it in one hotel. It's not a problem. You get to go to Vegas. You get to see the players have a nice time. Obviously, they're not necessarily gambling, but they give them stuff to do. Usually, they take them to Topgolf, some other kind of fun venue. So Pac-12 moving over there. It'll be interesting to see what hotel they pick, how the arrangement's going to be. It helps they're already having the conference championship there at Allegiant Field. So there's benefits to all of it. But certainly it is notable that now that the LA teams are gone, they're going to not be hosting the media days down there. If you want to join in at any point, if you'd like to talk about anything in college football, feel free to hit request. Would love to have you join me up here. Again, this is RCFB Talk 128. It's the off season. We're kind of looking at some of the stories going on. We've been talking about how there's been some hiccups at the ACC with FSU and Clemson threatening to leave. At the very beginning, we talked about, it looks like Tennessee might have a little bit of trouble with the NCAA. They've announced that they're in the middle of the Conference of Infractions has announced that they're going to have a formal decision at a later date. My immediate follow-up to that is to note that the NCAA has been milder overall in the last several years. I mean, again, some people were thrilled to see Miami get sanctioned for a name, image, likeness related issue with their super mega booster, John Ruiz, and the twins that play on the women's basketball team. But it amounted to a very light slap on the wrist. The Ruiz was not forced to disassociate from the program. It was very mild probation on the program, and the players themselves were not punished, which is one of those positives. One of the things in some of the reporting on where the NCAA is going, and Nicole Auerbach actually had a good article in The Athletic about this, they're trying not to punish student athletes quite as much as going after the programs, which I'm glad, because especially in this weird shift we are, where with NIL giving players opportunity to finally earn something for their name, image, likeness in sports where typically they hadn't at all. I mean, we're just now talking about Miami basketball, but also the real, the money makers for the programs in football and in men's basketball. This has been a great opportunity for them, and it's going to be tricky for the NCAA to step in. One thing I wanted to add, and I see Thax up here, so I want to hear from him, but Professor Michael McCann, who's been a guest of ours, both on our CFB with AMAs, as well as a guest of ours when we've had guests here on Twitter Spaces, and that's on us. We've been a little lazy on scheduling guests, but he had a good article in Sportico that came out last night that pointed out that the NCAA knows that they are risking a major lawsuit if they go too far with some of these mega boosters that are doing otherwise legitimate NIL arrangements. I mean, the whole situation with Ruiz was silly. It ends up that it was 2 days too early to have a dinner at his house. And that dinner, which he tweeted, that's the best part. We're not even trying to hide it. He tweeted a photo of the players at his house saying we're enjoying a dinner. It ends up they were off by 2 days, so that was an NCAA violation. So a lot of these folks who could get into it with the NCAA, if they're not careful, it could turn into another one of those lawsuits that ends up being a giant L for the association. But before we go on, Thak, what's up? It's great to see you. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing wonderful, fellas. Listen, it is just under 179 days until week 0 of the college football season, and I am feeling fantastic. You don't want to know why I'm feeling fantastic?
Absolutely.
Well, it's because I'm actually not feeling fantastic. How is Mizzou football in these Tennessee violations? How bad and how long do you think Mizzou football will get a postseason bowl ban?
Yes. And for those, I mean, a lot of the folks who are here in the offseason know what this is going at, but that's the classic problem. Mizzou always gets the hammer when any team, the lighter the punishment for any other program typically means Mizzou is going to get absolutely obliterated. They are the low to every high. I don't know. I mean, I am hesitant to say. I'm wondering if the NCAA is going to be milder now, and whether or not they are truly trying to not be what they were to Mizzou and to USC and to some of these programs as they were about a little over a decade ago. But
can we get reparations then? In that case, I mean, listen, Tennessee. As much as it pains me to see the NCAA overreaching in something silly, because I was there at one point. And if anybody here is not familiar with the situation, there was a rogue tutor who, if you looked at her Twitter feed, she was a total nutball, man. I mean, she was talking about conspiracy theories, and you could tell something wasn't right with her when you looked at her Twitter feed. And she aided in some academic violations, allegedly, and we had a postseason ban. But I mean, here's the thing: as much as I feel for those Tennessee fans, because it's not fun. It's something a little ridiculous. But here's the thing: they had money McDonald bags, man, and we're gonna get a postseason bowl ban, and they get off scot free. It would be hilarious to go on the Vol Nation message board after a potential postseason ban. You've got Mixon coming back. I mean, he's obviously a stud. Whichever way you put it, that quarterback that they got coming up is a stud. It would be hilarious to read the Tennessee message boards if they got a postseason bowl ban for this, and that is why I wish the death penalty among them. Seriously.
Well, I'm hoping not, but it's awkward too because this is all stuff from Pruitt's era. This isn't the current regime at Tennessee, and that's what's the big pain in all of this. When a team usually gets hit with sanctions, all the people that were involved are typically not even there, and the players aren't there, and the tutor isn't there, and all of the folks. It's interesting kind of going to this, how I've talked a little bit about how the Committee on Infractions, the infamous, jury and executioner for the NCAA, they're supposedly different now. They're trying to be different. Again, I just wanted to look back at that article Auerbach just put out on The Athletic. The current chair of the NCAA's Committee on Infractions, Dave Roberts, is actually a USC. He's an assistant to the athletic director at USC, and they quoted him as saying, I came on board right after USC got clobbered in 2010, and I didn't particularly like that decision. But at the same time, we need to change some things. And this group was very, very aggressive, but it changed the behavior. So we don't think the infractions process is perfect. Nothing's perfect, right? We're very amenable to change according to what the association and membership wants to do. Now, again, the only reason I'm thinking it might be mild is because of that Miami situation that just came out. It wasn't very serious, the punishment. It was the first time a real big NIL deal. I think they picked that one because it's a higher profile, because
Oh,
it
of
was the
course.
Cavender twins. They're high profile. They've got $1 million NIL deal between them. They transferred to Miami. I mean, because of the desire to earn even more money after being over at Fresno State. So, I mean, they're a higher profile in terms of the NIL world, and I think that's why they were picked for this particular cause of action. But again, they didn't punish the players. The players haven't had to do it. The coach, I believe, had to miss 3 games, and that's kind of how it came up because the coach missed the 3 games, and some folks did some investigation into it, and it turns out it was part of their arrangement, their negotiated settlement with the NCAA. And Ruiz apparently just has to sit down and have, I think it was like a deputy athletic director, has to now give him instructions on how things are supposed to work. I mean, I'm wondering how that conversation even goes. Is that literally like he has him over to his office, has his private chef that he's apparently, when they had the students over, to wow them with their mom and dad, you know, I, is this deputy athletic director going to go in like, oh, hey, John, hello, and they just sort of quickly go over some slides and enjoy, a poached lobster or something. I'm not sure, but if you can live that life, bless you. That's all I
Yeah.
gotta say. There's no insult coming from me there,
Well,
but
I'll tell you why here. This is a massive, massive ruling in terms. This Tennessee, specifically the Tennessee ruling, is going to have massive implications because if it is something very serious, uh, I think you're going to see a lot more. If it is something that they come down and they say, you know what, here's a slap on the wrist, it's going to change the way that schools self-report. I think we're going to see a definite increase in self-reports of minor violations. Because after the Mizzou thing, I mean, you were a moron to self-report anything, and that was
yeah.
sort of the initial thought I had when this Tennessee stuff came out a while ago. Is what are they doing? You know, I think this is a big a big, like, this decision will have a big impact on whether schools will self-report violations in the future, and I think there's going to be more violations in the
Yeah.
future that they might have to self-report with this NIL stuff, and
Oh, absolutely. The NIL is such a wild west right now that, again, going back to the Miami thing, I genuinely don't think they realize they did it. You don't tweet a picture out with the players at your
of
house saying
course,
you just had a dinner with them, only to know you violated the NCAA rules in the process. I,
right, especially
it
when you have these donors too, that you really have almost, it pre NIL, you had a little, the administration at least had some sort of control through weird back channels, but now it's the Wild West. The boosters don't care. They're going to do whatever they want, and not necessarily now, but they're allowed to do it in the open. And I think, with this kind of stuff, you're going to have to see more self-reporting in terms of, hey, this wasn't even us. This was just some booster.
One thing to note when we're talking about NCAA in terms of enforcement actions and potential violations, the big change that happened on January 1st, and it's something where, from the reporting, it sounds like a lot of university presidents didn't even realize this was coming through because it was kind of buried in the bigger update to how they were regarding the NIL and all of that stuff, is the presumed guilt angle, which obviously is totally out of whack with how our justice system works. But obviously this isn't, let's be honest, this isn't criminal stuff. This isn't anything like that. This is a voluntary association. Now some could argue it is, and certainly courts have been amenable to the fact that it is a little bit more than just a voluntary association. It can be forced to regulate itself in certain manners. But this presumed guilt angle, where if the NCAA gets what they deem to be credible information, not even just from the university, it could be from anywhere, which who knows how that'll go if some of these more organized message boards decide to take advantage of this. But they will now force the university to basically prove that they're not guilty. And this has been a radical shift in how enforcement will work. So I'm wondering, I mean, the NSA is going to have to be really careful with how they use it, but it could pop up this season in a way that a lot of people would not expect, particularly when we're talking potential NIL violations. But I think to an extent that you need something almost as mechanical as what happened in Miami, where okay, they accidentally hosted the students 2 days early. The guy tweeted the exact day it happened. The coach admitted they made a mistake. That was a little bit more easy to do. But some of this more, blurry stuff, because a lot of these arrangements are kind of being still developed on the fly. And now, as the year and a half or so has developed, we've seen, approaches to NIL collectives and how they can somewhat associate with universities, but at the same time not cross the line. And we're seeing states change the rules. Obviously, Florida, the state of Florida, loosened up their own state restrictions to match those of the other states. I mean, we're still kind of seeing things coalesce into some kind of a format, but I think the NCAA is a little afraid to jump into it too far, because it's, at the rate things are changing, they could start a cause of action on some of these things, or start an investigation, and by the time they even get to it, all the rules have changed, or perhaps were interpreted differently. So it's been a real curious situation, and we'll see how all of that works out. This is an off-season RCFB talk, so we've been doing these for about 30 minutes, and we like keeping them pretty trim and short in the off-season. So, Thak, it was great hearing from you, man. Thanks for coming up.
Yep, no problem. I want to see as much as it would negatively affect college football as a whole. The orange tiers would be fantastic if there was a.
I don't know. I'm not going to say that. I want to see Tennessee was such a fun, exciting team this year. I wouldn't mind seeing more of them at this point.
I totally agree. I just can't stand the damn orange. I can't stand the Bulls.
All right.
Man. They're terrible. Go Tigers, MIZ. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to say again, one story that I'm going to be looking forward to reading as we go into the rest of this week, heading into next, is seeing where this ACC stuff is headed. How much smoke is coming from Florida State and, to a lesser extent, Clemson? Are they willing to pay what they calculate to be $120 million to get out of the conference, or are they just trying to force the ACC into something like the Big 12 used to do, where it was an uneven revenue distribution model, where, as they're claiming, again, they're bringing in, 12 to 15% of the revenue to the ACC, and they want to get a bigger chunk than what they've been getting, which is 7%. Is it worth it? Will they have a home if they leave? Almost certainly. But we'll see where that story is going. That is one of the more exciting ones, especially in the kind of the off-season conference talk, as well as how that Pac-12 media deal is going to shape out, what channels are going to be on, what streaming networks are going to be on, simultaneously, whether or not the Big Ten is going to poach anyone else from the Pac-12. And one of the more interesting stories I read actually just today is Brett McMurphy on the Solid Verbal podcast said the Big 12 itself is secure as a conference because it doesn't seem like anyone really wants the members that are left in the Big 12. So I guess that's an interesting, positive situation to be in. But on behalf of myself, Bob Kyrie, I just wanted to thank all of you for joining me this evening as we have another off-season RCFB Talk. We do these every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. Have a great week, everybody. Now I'm going to hang up and listen.